Um, so this has been a particular interest of mine, and I just tell you a little story. Well, pre-pandemic, a few years ago, we were redoing the students will know when I say the C building, it's the big white building on the corner. You may not know that that's a very old factory building, over 100 years old, and the facade was actually falling off the building. So of course we had to repair it because we don't want anybody to get hit on the head. And that became a very big job. And as part of rehabilitating that whole building, we said, gee, wouldn't it be nice to have a green space in the back while we're doing it? So that's what's happening, a green space in the back. Part of it is a park. And then part of it, we decided we would try and designate that for an urban farm. And I spoke with some of the professors and said, you know, would you be interested in having an urban farm here? Because urban agriculture is for sure, you know, growing around the country. You know, our students have food insecurity issues. LaGuardia is probably, well, a bit of a food desert in the area, you know, and we felt, you know, it would be really an important thing to do. So that's what we decided to do. And we had the design done and a lot of work. But guess what? Then the pandemic came and we had to sort of stop and put everything on hold. So if you walk, I haven't walked by the back of the C building in a while, but we're certainly not ready or done. But in the meantime, we're putting in some new grant applications, and you know, Preeti and Holly did one, and we have support from USDA, which is terrific. And we're putting in a new grant application to try and get some money for a greenhouse back there so that we can really get the program going. And we are also collaborating with, there's a lot of neighbors actually that are doing various urban agriculture programs. So we're trying to connect with them and other community-based organizations so that we can launch that new track in our program of sustainable urban agriculture, which I'm really excited. And maybe you'll see me there helping you weed one day. I'm happy to weed. But that's just one track in our programs. And we have a very robust environmental science program and nutrition and culinary management program. And there are many, many opportunities there for you all. And I think it's a growing area. And I'm really glad for the faculty to put together this panel so you could hear, you know, what are the possibilities if you were thinking of having a career, you know, in this area. So I trust if you're a student here, you're either in one of these courses or programs, or maybe interested in it. So, you know, thank you again for being here. That's kind of really what I have to say. Preeti, if anybody has any questions for me, I could take a minute or two if we have time, but I don't want to use up the time because I think the panelists are have a lot more to say than I can. But
Absolutely.
While I'm here, I'm happy if there's a question or so.
Thank you so much, Paul. Thanks for being here. Your support for our programs means the world to us. And you know, that little history that you gave us was fantastic to kind of situate us. But yes, students, if you have any questions for Paul, you know, you don't get to interact with the provost very often. This would be the time. So if you do have questions, do post them in the chat box, and I'm happy to moderate that when we do our Q&A at the very end.
Great. I'm just looking at the chats. Thanks for all the hellos that are coming in. But, you know, Preeti, I just have to say, as you know, my schedule is very crazy. I do have another meeting, but I may stay a few minutes, but then I'll probably have to pop off for my other meeting. But I'll stay.
That's totally fine, Paul. Thank you. Thanks for being here. All right, so let's move on and introduce. So here I'm going to introduce our program directors. So this career panel is actually put together by two different academic programs. So we have the Natural Sciences Department with the Environmental Science Program, and we have the Health Sciences Department with the Nutrition Culinary Management Program. We have two wonderful program directors. So Dr. Porter Morgan is going to talk to us first about the Environmental Science Program and the new Sustainable Urban Agriculture track. And then Nicole Fernandez is going to jump into how she is kind of helping with cohesion within the program with a special course that she's kind of tweaking and working with. And I know that there are a lot of culinary management students here, so it's great to see you guys. Holly?
So hi there, everyone. I am Dr. Holly Porter Morgan, and I'm the director of the Environmental Science Program at LaGuardia. We also have the co-director here. If Ben wants to raise his hand, say hello, Dr. Ben Taylor. He is the co-director and a vital part of the program as well. You can see his name and email here. I just wanted to tell you quickly a little bit about the program. I see we have some of the students here. The program is essentially the first 2 years of an interdisciplinary program in the sciences. You can take it a lot of different places. A lot of our students go on in geospatial technology. Some of them go on a lot of them go on in environmental science. They go on in ecology, in botany, in conservation ecology. So in a lot of different areas that touch on the environmental sciences. It truly is an interdisciplinary, broad kind of area. And some of the specialized courses that are within this major at LaGuardia include obviously environmental science, and this course is very hands-on. We do water quality testing every week. You get to have your own individualized project looking at water quality in a specific place. And we do that every single week, testing for metals, testing for bacteria. We also have an ecology course, and Dr. Taylor teaches that. Dr. Taylor, you want to give them a sentence about the ecology course real quick?
Sure. Our ecology course is a course that our environmental students typically take in their last semester. And we cover a lot of different things. We cover aquatic environments, we cover terrestrial environments, we do a lot of mathematical modeling in the class. And it's typically a pretty enjoyable class for our students to take. Yeah.
Both of these classes, by the way, are available for students in other majors to take, just so you know. As long as you've had biology, general biology 1 to SCB 201 and SCB 202, you can speak to us and we can talk about you taking these classes, okay? You should be able to just go ahead and register for them, okay? We're not just for environmental science, we're also for liberal arts, math and science, liberal arts, humanities, as long as you have the prerequisites, okay? So the other class that's a big part of this major is Geographic Information Systems. And I have some of my students here from GIS class, and I have students in that class, they're from all different majors. GIS is in every single part of everything that we do. This is mapping on computers. So students in environmental sciences all have to take this class because, for instance, if you open a National Geographic or Smithsonian magazine, the first thing you see are maps of where elephants are living and how this or that species is changing with the changing climate. So learning how to make maps of our endangered plants and animals is a vital part of being an environmental scientist. So this class, again, that's open to anyone, and the prerequisites are pretty much just basic English, basic math. So a lot of different people are very interested in that. So those are some of the important classes for environmental science. I also wanted to mention that we have a brand new track in the environmental science major called Sustainable Urban Agriculture. And as Provost Arcario said, the farm that we're building is a big part of this. So the students in Sustainable Urban Agriculture are going to be focused on a more specific part of environmental science, which would be growing food, food solutions, and conservation of food resources. And students in this track will be taking a couple of different courses along with their biology and chemistry. They'll be taking courses in a course called Sustainable Urban Agriculture, which is a lecture, but then the lab part is actually learning about irrigation, learning about propagating plants. They'll take a class called Sustainable Vegetable Production, where the whole class is actually working at the urban farm. They'll take a class called Botany, Plants and people. So you learn about all the fun things about plants, like why are all the street trees that are ginkgo biloba males? What's wrong with the females? You know, why are they all males? Well, because the fruits from the females don't smell real great, but the plants themselves are really resistant to bacteria and fungus. So you learn about all these fun things, and we'll get out and we'll look at all these cool plants. Clearly, I'm excited about this. You also take a class in soil science and learn about the world beneath our feet. And we'll go out and we'll test soil in our community gardens. So there's a lot of really fun classes that come with that. And some of those classes also, soil science, botany, those are available to anyone, okay? And you can come and take those classes. In fact, we're teaching botany this spring. We're teaching soil science and botany again in the fall. So if you're interested in those, you see them right here. We'll put the brochure into the chat. The SCV 200. Anybody can take those. They are science electives. Okay. And I'm going to turn this over to Preeti. If you want to know more about the program or about any of these electives, we'll give everybody the digital brochure and you can check them out. You can talk to myself. You can talk to Ben if you're interested in any of these classes. Okay. So I'm going to turn it over to Preeti, and she's going to tell you about an internship opportunity, and then we're going to get on to the panel.
Awesome. Thank you, Holly. Thanks, Ben. I'm actually going to hand over quickly to Nicole for Nicole to talk to us about.
Thank you, Preeti.
Yes.
Yes. So hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Nicole Fernandez, the Program Director for the Nutrition and Culinary Management Program. I'm so thrilled to co-host this career panel with an excellent group of speakers, and also to showcase our new Sustainable Urban Agriculture major. And of course, our timely USDA grant we landed that supports both our majors, the SUA and the Nutrition and Culinary Management. So adding to the robust curriculum that Dr. Holly Porter Morgan just shared, I am tasked with the enjoyable work of restructuring our current Food and Culture Urban Studies course, SEN 240, to include themes of food justice, food policy, sovereignty, and activism. So in our current course, students in our program explore the impact of large businesses on agriculture, the impact of advertising on the US food system, the slow food movement, farm-to-table initiatives, heirloom fruits and vegetables, food insecurity, but we want to do more. And so the purpose of this restructuring is to help students get a deeper understanding of the role that food justice, policy, and activism can play in making food access more equitable and just. We want students to know that they have a voice and can find and use it. And so to that end, I also plan to have students engage in a quick immersive activity with organizations in the community to get a taste for this important work. So that's where, the food and culture restructuring is going to be headed. Thank you, Preeti.
Yes, Nicole, it's always fun to work with Nicole because she brings such an amazing social justice perspective to our work, which is always endearing and always, situates us in the right place. Sometimes scientists forget about that aspect. And so we're really happy to bring Nicole on board. So thanks, Nicole, for that. We're very excited about that new course. My name is Preeti Radhakrishnan. I am the project director for Project Sembrar. Sembrar is Spanish for to plant or to grow. And this is the name of our new USDA grant. So as Dr. Arcario spoke about earlier, LaGuardia has received $250,000 over a period of 4 years. And most of that money is going to you guys, to the students here. And so the plan is to kind of grow and sustain this program to create a diverse new bunch of students who are interested in urban agriculture to serve our Queens community and to kind of bring in the amazing community partners that we have in our local Queens and Brooklyn area, some of whom you'll hear from today. So we're very excited about it. Part of Project Sembrar is in creating a really innovative 3-week intensive experiential learning program. So what is this? So we're actually going to be sharing for the first time, we'll be sharing the application with you guys here. So hopefully you guys can apply. I'll give you the link in the chat box, and applications begin from today onwards. So what is it? It's a 3-week intensive program. You get paid $1,200 stipend. There are some requirements which you'll find once you fill in the registration form, and once we contact you, we'll give you information about what the requirements are. But we have fantastic partners like Oko Farms. We have Yemi here from Oko Farms, who's actually one of our panelists. We also have City Growers, we have Kingsland Wildflowers and Newtown Creek Alliance. And so the point is that students are going to be engaging in incredible experiential hands-on learning with our community partners. They'll end, the finale is doing a citizen science project with our pollinator pathways. So it's very, very exciting work, particularly for those of you who love working with your hands and being out in the field. This has your name written all over it. So please do know that we are accepting applications. So please do fill out the survey at the very end if you get a chance. So I don't want to waste any more time. I think we spent enough time talking about the program. So let's talk about our wonderful panelists here. As you can see, we have an incredible array of powerful, female, diverse population here of panelists, which we're very excited about. We have Lourdes Chamorro, who is a research entomologist with the U.S. Department of Agriculture. We have Shino Tanikawa, who is the executive director of the New York City Soil and Water Conservation District. We have Yemi Amu, who is the founder and director of Oko Urban Farms. We have Olga Vargas, who is a soil scientist with the U.S. Department of Agriculture, the Natural Resource Conservation Service. And we have Willow Ayers, who is a climate policy analyst at the Department of Environmental Conservation. So we're very excited to have the panelists here. Each panelist will take about 15 minutes to talk about their career trajectories and how they got into the careers that they got to. So students, please do use this time to listen carefully, take notes, and please do ask questions at the very end with our Q&A. You can post in questions while the panelists speak into the chat box, and either Holly, Nicole, and I will moderate that at the very end. So we're going to actually begin with Willow. So Willow, are you here and able to share your screen?
Hi, everybody. It's Willow. I apologize. I just got on the call, and sorry for the delay.
That's
let
okay.
me just pull up my presentation here.
Yes.
Just need a moment. Thanks.
Sure. No problem, Willow. Let me just.
Yeah, and I appreciate the chance to go first today. I have a busy day of meetings, and this works out great for me. So thank you. I'll pull up my presentation right now.
Absolutely.
We're happy to have you.
Oh, nice. Thank you. All right, let me see here. Are y'all seeing presentation?
Yes, we see you.
Great. So I apologize if I missed introductions or anything more formal. I'm going to hide my video for now, but I'll turn it back on when my presentation is over. It's great to be here. First of all, thank you so much for the invitation. My name is Willow Ayers. I'm a climate policy analyst with the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, and I'm not sure I've ever been asked to talk about my career trajectory before. I do a lot of presentations, but a lot of them are about what my current job is and the topics that we're working on. So this was very fun for me to put together, and I'm grateful for the opportunity. I'm actually going to start all the way back in high school, because when I was thinking about my career and my personality and learning how I learn, basically, and learning about my strengths as a learner and a student, and that has followed all the way through to the position I hold now. And so I'm going to start here, because I wasn't always the nerd that I am now. I was a dedicated jock. I wrote here on the screen that I had a loose interest in art, because I wasn't very into school, and I wasn't really that focused on my academics at all. I loved being outside, and I loved hiking, and I had a hard time sitting still. So I have to admit, high school, I didn't focus that much on my academics. And that did change, and I learned a lot about my learning style from this beginning here in high school. I did end up going to college. I attended SUNY Oswego. My softball skills got me on the varsity team in college. I played 4 years there. I really loved it. But again, I focused a lot of my efforts on the athletic side of college, and I really didn't have a lot of specific academic interests until my junior year. I did well enough in my first few years there, but there was a turning point for sure in my junior year when I took a botany class. I'll never forget Dr. Jim Seago and his interest in, I think we kind of hit it off personally. So it made a big difference to me to go from these large lecture halls in my first 2 years where I could kind of melt into the background, and I had a lot of anonymity, and I didn't have to be called upon or seen unless I raised my hand, which I rarely did. But suddenly I was in Dr. Seago's botany class. It was much smaller, and he had he was a great teacher. You know, he had a great personality, and I couldn't really hide in that class. And so not only did I take an interest in what we were learning, green plants. The focus was on green plants, and he presented them as these sentient, magical beings. And I think I just loved that so much that I gravitated towards this professor and the work that he was doing. I shortly after decided to work on my graduate thesis with him, my senior thesis, and I declared myself as a biology major, and my grades improved dramatically. I really started to find something that I cared about and something that I wanted to pursue. So this was a big shift for me my junior year. I started working on some research with Dr. Seago, and we took several trips to Canada to use a fancy microscope to evaluate plant tissues and cells. And I really got into this work. I was proud of it. I used it as my senior thesis, and we ended up taking that work because of its originality and its focus to the International Botanical Congress in Vienna, Austria, all the way back in 2005. And I had never traveled abroad, so for me this was profound as a young person, and it was really my first taste of a professional academic environment. I remember being referred to as Dr. Ayers a few times, mistakenly for sure, but it was fun to mingle with these senior scientists and this global professional environment. So I had a wonderful time. I remember that just really having a profound effect on my interests and my confidence also. Later, we published some of that work in a few different iterations in a couple of different journals. And Dr. Seago was the one who told me to pursue a graduate degree. I hadn't given it a lot of thought at the time. And under his guidance, I did apply to graduate school. You know, my grades the first 2 years were not exceptional or anything, but I made up for it enough in my second 2 years of my undergraduate to be accepted at a small program, a small biology program at SUNY Oneonta. And again, I think I had some realizations about my personality and the ways that I learned that this ended up being a really great school for me and my learning style. It's a really small program, or at least it was at the time, back in 2005, but it was sort of a design your own curriculum with really small class sizes. The program was tiny. So I got to focus on the things that I really was into and the things that really interested me. We did a lot of outdoor learning, learning about wetland plants and invasive species, and did a lot of field exercises, learning about soil types. And I needed this. I needed, again, to not have any anonymity, to be expected to participate. And I was called upon a lot to engage with what we were learning. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is I needed a lot of supervision to be a good learner and to be engaged. And I got that in grad school. I think it made a big difference. And so my last bullet here is I did end up majoring in biology, and my focus was on invasive plants and wetland ecosystems, something that I began to develop a expertise in later in, excuse me, later in my career. I had several post-college jobs that I really enjoyed. I wanted to mention a few of them here. I did a stint as an environmental educator through the Student Conservation Association, which was a collaboration between AmeriCorps and New York State DEC. I really loved this job. I got to work at a DEC education center here in the Albany, New York area. And I basically got to take kids out into the woods and be excited with them about whatever we were seeing, whether that was trees or bugs or flipping over rocks in the stream and looking at what was underneath. And it was my first interaction with the DEC environment, the state agency environment. My supervisor and the people that I was working with were DEC staff, and I really felt at home here. And I think that was really when the seed was planted that I wanted to work for DEC, or that I could see myself being there. And I started to have a small goal in my head of oh, I would love to work for DEC someday. But it took many years before that happened. My summer after this environmental education job, I took on a summer position with a small local environmental consulting firm. And I basically ran a GPS all summer out in the woods, doing wetland delineations and doing all sorts of field studies and surveys alongside the staff. This was also a great taste of what sort of professional work I could be involved in, and gave me some good experience. But the best part was that their ecologists left that a few months later, and I got hired full-time with this environmental consulting firm, and I was there for almost 7 years. I gained a lot of good experience in environmental assessment and field studies, habitat assessments, permitting for development projects and things like that. And I put on here the logo for the Ecological Society of America because I did earn my formal ecologist certification through this organization. And something I enjoy being a part of. I don't think my certification is current anymore, mostly because of my career shifted gears, but those sort of professional credentials give you some credibility of something I put on my resume, and was a nice thing to add there. This picture on the right is not me or a personal photo, but it was what the work looked like that I was involved in when I worked at these environmental consulting companies, outside all day, carrying around your lunch and your tools and your notebook, and really taking either GPS analysis or direct documentation of what we were seeing out there. A lot of it had been slated for some sort of development or maybe endangered species assessments or something like that. But I did leave my first company to work at a much larger regional engineering company. I did a lot of that environmental work on airports and roadsides. So working for a bigger company gave me a different kind of experience. the nice perk was I got paid really well, but I was also traveling a lot throughout New England and throughout the Northeast. Probably a little bit more than I wanted to be away from home all the time, a lot of, week-long trips and staying in hotels. And but again, I got to spend my days outside. I got to, really become, really have an expertise in plants and trees. And I got a lot out of this job. I think I was only there for 2 years, but I still felt this draw to work for the state agency and to have that collaborative, supportive environment that I felt when I had that original environmental education job. And so I took the first chance I had to leave the private consulting world and work for DEC. It wasn't as a bona fide state employee at first. I worked for a few years as a DEC contractor through a contract that they administered through SUNY ESF in Syracuse. But I got hired as an invasive species response and management coordinator, and this was a great way to get my foot in the door. I was more than a temporary seasonal employee, but not quite a full state employee. But this was a great transition for me. This slide shows some of the things I was involved in. I developed resources and guidance documents for invasive species management projects across the state, and I named a few of the most notable ones here. Hydrilla, which is an aquatic wetland, an aquatic plant mostly found in southern New York. Hemlock woolly adelgid, which has diseased and impacted many of our hemlocks, especially in the southern United States, but much newer to certain parts of New York. The spotted lanternfly, which got a lot of attention recently in Pennsylvania, and New York's work to try to keep it at bay and under control. So I really enjoyed this job, and I wrote here on the slide, again, it expanded an expertise, and I started to create a reputation at DEC, and I think that it helped solidify my professional intentions of staying at DEC and doing what I needed to do to make that happen. I also made a lot of professional connections, and I think that that's really what led to my current job, other than taking the civil service exams and the things that you have to do to get hired at the state level, which I'll mention a little bit later. But I did develop some professional connections, like I said, that gave me a lot of good experience for the job I have now, which is, as I mentioned in the beginning, I serve as the climate policy analyst in the Office of Climate Change. And this slide just has a little bit of a flavor of some of the things that we work on. We develop this one with the maps of New York State. We fund all kinds of research on climate impacts and climate projections and potential triggers and thresholds for what New York especially will face in terms of climate change. The graphic on top represents some of the information we put together. A lot of it is for social media to kind of convey the importance or the complexities of climate change in a simple way, so that people can grasp what New York is trying to do. I feel very proud to say that New York makes climate change one of its top issues, not just in funding, but in hiring staff and making it a priority across a lot of sectors. So we also have our Climate Smart Communities program, and the logo is down here on the slide, but there's a grant program associated with that, where we give money to municipalities to work on their climate change projects, whether that's on the mitigation side, trying to limit their greenhouse gas emissions, or or on the adaptation side, where they may be restoring a coastal area to better ease the sea level rise impacts or something like that. This is my day in the life slide. I apologize for all the language and all the words on here, but I wanted to make sure I didn't forget anything. I think one of the best things about this job is the variety. I get to work on a lot of different things all throughout the year, and that keeps it fresh, and that keeps it interesting to me. But so these are a few things that I could be doing on any given day. We often have staff meetings where we coordinate with the other sections. I work on the adaptation and communication section, but we also have our administrative staff, the mitigation section that works solely on greenhouse gas emission reduction work. And then we have our local engagement team that works with local governments. The second bullet here mentions those local government officials. We often meet with them to discuss grant projects and hurdles that they might need to get over to finish their project or to make it the most effective. I might review a report that ensures alignment with New York State's climate goals. If any of you are into the climate news in New York, we have the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act that was passed in 2019. And it spurred a lot of work, and it has some very ambitious goals for New York. And we often work to make sure that we're moving in the right direction to meet those goals. I also might attend a workshop or a webinar to learn about a coastal restoration project or recent research regarding precipitation modeling. So we get a lot of chances to learn about the research and the cutting edge. A lot of climate science is evolving and is very new. So we're encouraged to keep up on that. The next bullet, we might have a brainstorm session with my colleagues about how to improve our programs or how to be more inclusive or to reach disadvantaged communities. This has become a very important issue for our office and for our work. I might create a GIS map that identifies wetlands for carbon sequestration initiatives. We've been trying to evaluate ways that our land management can help offset the emissions that New York produces. And actually more recently, due to COVID-19, we have a 50-50 telecommuting policy, which has made my life feel very balanced. I'm home half time. Actually, I'm home today, and I'm in the office half time. So that feels to me a very effective way of getting into the office and having that dedicated space, but also the relaxed nature of working from home and not having to commute or anything like that. So I thought I'd mention that DEC actually now has a long-term telecommuting policy, and I think a lot of people were really happy to see that put in place. So just a few of what I see as the real benefits to the job that I'm in now. Like I mentioned, we have a lot of variety in the projects, and there's a seasonality to the work, meaning that the first half of the year might be dedicated to our certification program and reviewing submissions to honor those local governments that do an exceptional job at addressing climate change. I also feel like I get the chance to think creatively and critically about the work we're doing. And at least in our office, we are encouraged to attend trainings and professional development. We also have performance evaluations with our supervisors that I think are a great opportunity to talk about your career and what you want to do and where you think you might need support, or where you want to drive your learning and your career aspirations. So I feel a lot of support in the office that I'm in, and I have felt that working for the state agency overall. So I just wanted to mention those, as I think that if any of you seem interested in the state agency side of things or this line of work, I see these as real pros to working for DEC. I wanted to mention just a couple of things. Overall, I found that maintaining professional relationships, both those that people that helped me along the way in college or in grad school, and then throughout my career, I feel like whether it's asking for a reference or asking for support or help or advice, or that these people and these relationships have really helped me be where I am today and helped my career. So I just wanted to mention that as a if it could be a word of advice or anything like that. I want to also mention the Professional Career Opportunities Exam. It's a civil service, a state exam that's offered every couple of years, and I believe anyone. I'm not now I'm choking on the requirements, but I believe if you have an undergraduate degree or maybe a few classes under your belt, that you can be eligible to take this exam, and it puts you on the list for several titles in the civil service and the state agency positions. So I encourage people to take this if you're at all interested. It would take a Saturday of your life and could really allow you to be canvassed for many different positions in state service. I took it, that's how I ended up at the Office of Climate Change as well. DEC in particular also offers all kinds of seasonal internships and temporary positions outside of being hired as a full-time state employee. And I know people really enjoy these jobs and have a lot of fun doing them. I'd like to also end by saying that I've been really inspired both in the climate world and beyond about what young people are doing these days. And I wish you all the best of luck in whatever you're pursuing and whatever you're thinking about. I unfortunately won't be able to stay on today for the panel discussion, but I've got my email here up on the screen, and I truly encourage you to contact me if you have questions or if you'd like to talk about working at DEC or anything else. So thank you so much. It's been an honor to be here.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Willow. Thank you so much for being here. That was incredible. You know, it's intriguing to us who are in the educational field. You know, I've never had any opportunities when I was an undergrad to have conversations or interact with people from such diverse career trajectories. You know, so it's really lovely to see how your career trajectory kind of morphed and changed over time. I particularly loved what you talked about at the beginning with relationship to personality and learning style, and how that kind of helped you think about deciding your career choice. That's something I talk about with our first year seminar students all the time. It's, you know, it's a tricky phenomenon. It's like finding your element as is written, you know, finding that intersection between something you're really good at and something that you're passionate about. And I also loved how you talked about pay and travel, and how, you know, the pay and travel aspect of this job is actually quite nice. Something that students ask us about all the time. Students, if you guys have questions for Willow, please do put them in the chat box, and I'm happy to either send it over to Willow via email, or you have Willow's email ID as well. But thank you so much for being here, Willow. It was awesome hearing from you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so who do we have next on our list? Let's see. We have Lourdes Chamorro, who is our next panelist. Lourdes, on to you.
Hi. Yes. Hi. Well, thank you very much for having me. And this again, I would probably echo Willow's words. I mean, this has been I think the first time that I've ever been asked maybe to talk about my career path. So sometimes you forget and you don't really look back. So it's been interesting. So let me go ahead and share my screen here. And I will put it as a, there you go. Okay, so I'm Lourdes Chamorro, and I'm a research entomologist with the US Department of Agriculture with the Systematic Entomology Laboratory. And I'm the nation's specialist on weevils. And since I've been a very young girl growing up in Nicaragua, this is Nicaragua, I was fascinated with what lived in these tide pools. And I would just spend hours looking through these tide pools, and a lot of my family members and friends thought that that was very odd, but it was okay. I liked it, and I thought that I was going to be a marine biologist. I also liked scientific names, and I didn't quite understand them when I was young, but I found it fascinating that there were these scientific names. And I also, thinking back now, I was very fascinated too about exploration and the Challenger or things like that. Like they would just go and explore the oceans, or people go into a rainforest and explore places like that. Well, naturalists in Nicaragua, well, that's not a thing, okay? and so it very early on, I had to be a little bit more pragmatic about what I was going to study, and it was going to be my other passion, which was animals and veterinary medicine. So I enrolled at university, and my parents didn't want me to go too far from Nicaragua. So there was an American accredited university in Nicaragua, University of Mobile. And there I began the kind of general coursework. There's no veterinary program in Nicaragua at the time. So I had to do the general coursework and then transfer on to something. So there at University of Mobile, I met my ecology professor in the top here, Dr. Eric Vandenberg. And he taught ecology, but he was a taxonomist. And he had in his office collections of butterflies like these. These aren't the ones, but I was fascinated by them. And I had no idea these things existed in Nicaragua. I mean, there was a war going on, so we really didn't go out and explore. I didn't even know that there were these butterflies that would mimic leaves, and he had them in his collection. And so one of the things, and he had this sort of passion about what he did. He had this net, and I remember being in the car with him on one of the field trips, and he can just stop the car, got out, and there was a butterfly that crossed in front of him, and he just was going after it. And I thought, I've never seen a person do this. This is amazing. And he also had this real depth of knowledge about Nicaraguan natural history. He had all these books. He was also into conservation, and he just opened up this whole world for me. And I wanted to be Eric Vandenberg. I wanted to learn and be just like, know as much as he knew. And I thought, well, maybe what I can do is do a minor in entomology when I go on and transfer. There was another fellow also at the university, and he was in my high school as well, and Dr. Patrick Warner. And he was also another individual who to me was very inspiring, because he knew a lot about anthropology and archaeology in Nicaragua, and he would go into the forests in Nicaragua and try to find actually the only pyramids of Nicaragua, which I think he passed away a couple of years ago, but he never found. So I transferred to the university, to Ohio State University, to continue on with my veterinary medicine. But while I was there, I enrolled in a minor in entomology. I wanted to pursue this. And during one of my courses was aquatic entomology. And my professor, Brian Armitage, he was the director of the Ohio Biological Survey. And during one of the courses, he said, if any of you want to volunteer at the Ohio Biological Survey, I have a project sorting caddisflies. So caddisflies, it's interesting because Willow mentioned about water quality, and these insects are used as water quality bioindicators. And so we needed to know the baseline data, what's there. And he had been collecting aquatic insects across Ohio, and he needed somebody to sort through the samples and identify it. So I thought, well, I don't really have much going on after my classes in the afternoon, so I'm just going to go ahead and do this. This is great. So I became familiar with the caddisflies or Trichoptera of Illinois, and I learned to identify the caddisflies. And again, I came across all these scientific names, and I loved it. I just completely immersed myself in this, and this was something that I really liked to do. At this point, I was encouraged by my supervisor to perhaps pursue the caddisflies of Nicaragua as a master's program, as a master's, and I never really thought about graduate school. And so, but the expert on neotropical caddisflies. So these are the caddisflies here on the left, on the bottom left, and they make different cases, this particular subfamily. And these are the larvae, and the adults are the ones on the right. And the neotropical caddisflies are very showy. Most of caddisflies, they're just pretty drab, moth-looking things. So the expert on neotropical caddisflies, I could work with him, and I said, okay, perfect. I'll work on the caddisflies in Nicaragua. Sign me up. I applied for to graduate school, and I was accepted. And okay, well, where is it? It's actually University of Minnesota. So the neotropical specialist on caddisflies is actually, well, not quite Fargo, but Minnesota. And a lot can happen in the middle of nowhere. And a lot did for me. So while I was a graduate student there at University of Minnesota, and again, very similar to what Willow was saying, in undergraduate, I was a good student. In high school, maybe I was B's and C's, A's, maybe once here and there, but I just absolutely loved taxonomy, and I loved insects, and I loved doing these kinds of things, and learning and becoming really the expert in a particular group. Nothing had been known about Trichoptera or caddisflies in Nicaragua. We had no idea if we even wanted to understand the water quality of any of the systems in Nicaragua. And so so I published a few new species. So we described quite a new species from Nicaragua. I went on a few expeditions, and as you can see here on the bottom left, we were still under very extreme cases of security, and I actually, my parents were not quite keen on me going, but they sent me off with 3 armed guards, and then on the right here was one of the expeditions that I was able to join with my colleague. He's on the top there with the mustache. That's Jean-Michel Maes, and he runs the Museo Entomológico de León. So he's in the museum, the only museum in Nicaragua, and he single-handedly has provided or generated all the data regarding insects in Nicaragua. So he called me up one day, and he's like, oh, do you want to go on this expedition with me and a bunch of odonate specialists, dragonflies and damselflies? And I was like, sign me up, I'm going. So this is the group here on the right. And it was great. It was fantastic. I had never been to this part of the country. We collected, I was actually going through some, I think I got sick and I had a fever. I was actually really sick at that point, but then I got over it. And we found a few new species, including a damselfly. And then I had the opportunity for 1.5 years to stop my graduate work and move to Washington, D.C. for personal reasons. And my advisor at the time had got a large National Science Foundation grant. And he said, well, Lourdes, do you want to join the PhD program at the university, switch your career plan, and then you'll be one of my students and you'll get your PhD. And I thought, well, that's crazy. I've never thought of getting a PhD because that's a lot of work. I don't know if I'm committed to, I don't know if I'm ready for this, but he obviously saw something in me that perhaps I didn't even see in myself. But I realized that if I did want to continue doing research and applied for National Science Foundation grants, that I had to have a PhD. They weren't going to give me grants if I wasn't, if I didn't have that. So I thought, okay, I will, but I need to go to Washington. I applied for a pre-doctoral fellowship at the Smithsonian, and I got it. And I started working with my dear mentor, Ollie Flint, and he passed away 2 years ago. And he's again the same kind of person, just knows everything about caddisflies. He walked into his office, he would stop what he was doing and tell you everything that he had been collecting. He had gone to Brazil the last year, and just wonderful. Just and he was the like one of the experts in neotropical caddisflies. He was the curator of the collection, and I worked under him or with him for a year and a half there. But my grant money was about to be done. It was only a 10-week graduate fellowship. And so I had the opportunity to meet this other mentor, Terry Irwin. And Terry Irwin is a legend. He is known, oh, okay, I see some people nodding, great. Yeah, he was featured in National Geographic, and he gave the plenary speaker session at our Entomological Society of America. And he just captivated all of us. As a student, we invited him to give a presentation at our University of Minnesota, and he agreed, and so he was great. So when I was at the museum, and he's a curator, he was a curator there. And during an Entomological Society of Washington meeting, I saw that he was there. We had met before, and I had the courage to go up to him and just have a small talk. And then I said, I'm looking for a job. So if you have any opportunities, maybe I can work on sorting insects for you or something. And he said, well, right now I don't have anything. Okay. It turns out that later on he did. And Terry's research was focused on understanding biodiversity. And he was the first one to estimate the number of insects. Of animals, and he also developed this way of collecting and reaching the canopy. So you see him there dangling, and he would fog the canopy. He revolutionized the way that we understood what was in the forest, and he generated a lot of data. And part of this data, so you can see there in the sample, there's a lot of insects. So you collect a lot of these, and then you have to sort them. So I was hired on to work with him to sort the material that he collected, and sadly he passed away 2 years ago as well. And while I was sorting, there were these insects that made cases just like caddisflies. Well, they're in the canopy. What's going on? And all of a sudden, a new world opened up for me, the world of beetles. And I started. I was curious, and there was an individual on the floor who said, I told her about these really bizarre case-making beetles. And she said, the world expert is just down the hall. Have you met Sasha? And I said, no, I haven't met her. Well, Sasha turns out to be this gentleman. And we started collaborating on different aspects of chrysomelid, or these types of leaf beetle systematics. And published on describing new species, genera, tribes, and so on. He also has a new interesting method of collecting the insects that he's interested in, which is sifting leaf litter. And I also was invited on with a group of scientists from the USDA to go on expeditions. So we went to the Dominican Republic, we went to Bolivia, we went to Puerto Rico, and that was the beginning of kind of the end of my Trichoptera research. Although I finished my dissertation, I went back to Minnesota, I finished my dissertation, I published, I described 39 new species, actually more than that, of Trichoptera, neotropical Trichoptera. One of them is named after my daughter, and did the phylogeny, which is understanding the evolutionary relationships. And once you understand the evolutionary relationships, then you can have that you can make predictions about other aspects of biology that you don't know. You may not know. So this is just some examples of some of the phylogenetic. Yeah, so we actually designated 2 new families. So you get to do this kind of really high level sort of stuff. And then I moved on to working on these beetles. And Terry Irwin contacted me and says, "Are you interested in still working on the canopy stuff at Smithsonian?" I said, "Yeah, I am." So, okay, let's write a proposal. So I wrote a proposal to be a postdoc at Smithsonian, and those are extremely competitive. And mine came in second, my proposal to work on this one group of these little case-making beetles. And Terry took it to the director of the Smithsonian, and he said, "Look, this is a really good proposal. Lourdes is she represents, a minority group. Isn't there any way that perhaps we can fund it? There's any grants for minorities and so on?" And they actually created a grant for me for a year, which was amazing. I couldn't believe it. So I got the year, and I started working at the Smithsonian. I went back and worked on leaf beetles with Sasha and with Terry. And we actually found a new tribe of leaf beetle. And then I got an Encyclopedia of Life grant that held me over for 6 months. And we created these web pages in order to be able to have that baseline data in order to identify organisms, these leaf beetle insects. And then there was this beetle called the emerald ash borer, which I saw on Willow's invasive species poster. So all of you perhaps know about this beetle. It came from China, and it's devastating all of the Fraxinus ash trees. And we had a grant from the Forest Service for 3 years to understand the relatives. So what other Agrila species could potentially come into the United States? We have no idea about what these could be. The problem with the genus Agrila is that it has more than 3,000 species. So it's not something that is easy to manage. So we had this project, and my colleague for whom this project was he had been designated to be the postdoc on this. He couldn't make it. He's my colleague here on the left, the second one. And so because I had published already, I had demonstrated my ability to switch groups. I was offered this postdoc for 3 years, and I took it. And there was a team to lead this research. We went to China, we went to Japan. Another team went to Vietnam to collect these insects. And during this time, I was right at the end of my postdoc, and I was really, really nervous about my trajectory. What position am I going to get? There were a lot of jobs I was applying to, and one of the positions that I applied to was at the Smithsonian. And I say this, I didn't get it. It happens. You also need to put in the negative stuff, and it's not the end of the world. It was a position that would have been fantastic, but a few months later, a position opened up for the nation's specialist on weevils. And this person would work with the US Department of Agriculture, with the Systematic Entomology Laboratory on weevils of agricultural importance and direct your research in that direction. And so I was able to demonstrate to the committee that I had published successfully in different orders, in different groups, and I can learn new groups. And I think that I convinced them. And so that's it. That's the job. I got it. And it's from the moment I learned about the Systematic Entomology Laboratory, that was the job I wanted, and I have. I love my job. And I'll put a little slide of what my day-to-day is. So the US Department of Agriculture has, and they're all basically in my lab, specialists whose expertise is just on a particular group. So my expertise is on weevils. It's not a small group. There's 62,000 species of weevils, 62,000. And I'm also the curator of the collection at the Museum of Natural History. As part of my work, I am the national identifier. So I'm the authority on insects that are intercepted at ports of entry. So for example, today, this was my determination request that came in, and it came from San Juan, Puerto Rico, and I was pinged to identify it. It was actually this beetle here. Right now, because of remote work, we're getting a lot of them sent to us digitally. Sometimes I can't identify it and I need the physical specimen because you need to do dissections of the genitalia and so on. And then I identify that, and then based on my ID, the cargo or whatever is at port, it gets turned around or fumigated or whatever. Then I also take care of the collection, so 1.5 million specimens at the Museum of Natural History. And as part of the work that we do, I do field work, and I continue to go. So this past week, I've been coordinating to go to Panama to do field work for 3 weeks. But I would say 80% of my day, I do research. I sit and I learn about weevils. I sit and I generate new information about weevils. And currently I'm working on the definitive work for American weevils with my colleagues. So how to identify them, everything that you need to know about North America mainly. And this is just part of it, like a lot of research planning. So going to a lot of my research is in Hawaii. So there's a lot of invasive species in Hawaii, yet we don't know what's there. There's a lot of endemic weevils. So what is still there? Most of my time is getting permits. So this is how I collect my weevils, with a little sheet. And that's it. If there are any questions, please.
Amazing. Wow. Thank you, Lourdes. Thank you so much for that. That was really spectacular to see how that trajectory of yours kind of changed and evolved over time. So it's when you had those pictures up of Terry Irwin, it really brought back memories. So I've watched him do a plenary at one of the entomological conferences. So I'm a behavioral ecologist. I study Diptera mostly. Benjamin Taylor here studies social insects. So you're in familiar territory here with people who have an innate love for insects. But I've watched Irwin and I've seen him. We've studied his work. I've read his papers. He's just a spectacular person. It's kind of sad that in these past 2 years we've lost some really incredible scientists like naturalists, E.O. Wilson, Terry Irwin, and so many others. That's kind of sad, but yeah, it really is. But I think you did a great job letting students know about just the sheer diversity of opportunities that they have for them, because students don't think about being research entomologists and earning a career.
I didn't, for sure. I didn't.
Right? In doing something you love and you enjoy doing. So that's really spectacular.
I think that's kind of what I found myself when I was thinking about, well, what was it about all these people that I gravitated to? They were all extremely passionate about what they did. Yes, and perhaps they saw the passion in me for what I wanted to do. And I think that and going back to my roots, and another thing that Willow was saying too was reputation and connection. But I was at the Smithsonian for quite some time, and you can make or break yourself. You can say I'll do this, and then you don't. Right. And so that follow through, I wanted to put on my presentation, like there were products that were generated, I published, I completed this. And if you're there, you're given that opportunity, but you don't make the most of it. Like I think a lot for me was luck, but I think I made a lot of that luck. I could have squandered it anyway, but please, any questions?
Yes. If you have questions for Lourdes, please do put it in the chat box. We are going to move on to our next panelist. We're going a little bit behind time, but we're going to start with Olga Vargas. Thank you so much for being here, Olga, and thank you, Lourdes, again for being here.
You're welcome. Let me know when you can see my screen.
Yes, we see you.
Okay, so my name is Olga Vargas, and my screen is on a different monitor, so I'll try not to look away from you too much. I can't find where to turn off the video right now. So I'm a soil scientist and I work also for USDA, but I work for the Natural Resource Conservation Service. And I've actually been lucky enough to map in New York City and in upstate New York here in the Adirondacks. So I love this is a poster that a colleague put together of what a soil scientist is and what we think it is. I still like number 2. My mom definitely thinks that's what I do for a living. And my kids used to think my son would tell me that I wasn't a real scientist because I didn't build robots or work in the lab, but I still think I'm a real scientist. So we mentioned GIS. We use a lot of GIS, probably in the wintertime, probably on a daily basis. So I'm also from Central America. I was actually born in Costa Rica, but I came to Queens actually as a very young child. So I grew up within the New York City school system. So I went to school all through high school, and then I was lucky enough to go to Cornell. And while I was at Cornell, I was studying natural resources. I thought myself to be a pre-med major, but thankfully, Cornell didn't take pre-med majors. You had to major in something else. And I fell into natural resources because on vacations, my family would go to Costa Rica. We'd go visit the national park system, and I just fell in love with volcanoes and the national park system there. And while I was taking ecology and field biology, we had to memorize the Latin names of every plant, fish, bird, and I really struggled with that. And then I took a soil science class. It wasn't required, but I kind of fell into it. And I loved soils, and it made sense to me, and it just kind of clicked. And Cornell at that time had a soil judging team. And I'm like, who judges soil? But they do on a college level, and it was so much fun. So I really fell in love with soils that way. And when I graduated college, I came back home for a while, and I was teaching swim lessons and volunteering. And I volunteered for USDA out in Riverhead as an Earth Team volunteer. And then I started applying for jobs like crazy. And so I actually didn't get my first job in soils till 6 months after I graduated. My mom was on vacation in Costa Rica, and I'm like, guess what? I'm moving to Illinois in 2 weeks. And she's like, no, you're not. And I'm like, yes, I am. So after we figured that out, my first job with NRCS was in Illinois. And it was actually on the conservation side. So there are 2 sides with the Natural Resource Conservation Service. There's the agricultural side that works with farm bill programs and putting conservation on the land, building waterways, ag chemical handling facilities, manure storages, terraces, contour strips and buffers. And then there's the soil survey side of NRCS that's mandated by Congress to provide a soil survey for the whole United States. And even though they've been working at it for like 100 years now, they're not quite done, but they're getting closer every year. So I worked in Illinois as a conservation technician for 2 years. And then I was ready to move back to the East Coast. So I was able to get a transfer to Maine. And I worked in Southern Maine for 2 years. And I must say, when I lived in Illinois and Maine, it was the first time I like when people ask you, oh, you're from New York. Oh, they're like, oh, we're from upstate New York. And I'm like, no, sorry, I'm from Queens. And they're like, what are you doing here? But it all worked out. And it was a really great experience to see production agriculture and then to work in different states. And then it took me about 4 years, but eventually I was able to switch over to the soil survey side and to come back to New York City. And I really loved that. And I was able to work on the New York City soil survey for a few years. And then my husband, who was from upstate, bribed me And so I ended up taking a position upstate New York, 'cause this is where he's from. But I still get to travel back and forth quite a bit because my position now is a resource soil scientist. So I'm not actively working on the soil survey every day. I'm kind of the bridge between the two sides, from the soil survey side and the conservation side. So I still get to make maps, which is nice because I love making maps. But we also have other geophysical tools that we use for soil survey, either for conservation or for soil survey. So we use ground penetrating radar, and we're worried about depth bedrock for soil survey, or if we're looking at manure storages, and we want to know where the bedrock is, and we can't keep punching holes everywhere when we're trying to design something. We do a lot of outreach and education, from elementary school to college. We do wetland restoration. We work with our urban ag producers. So, New York is a very diverse state, and we have a lot of different agriculture throughout the state. So I mainly cover Eastern New York, but I cover it from up in the Adirondacks all the way down to Long Island. So I do get on the road quite a bit. But I like it that way because everything is always different. Each season is different. And I get to have a lot of different variety in my projects. So I'm never bored. 20 years later, I'm still not bored, which I think is a really good thing, that I get paid to not also to help people, but to also keep learning. And I think and I'm also not behind a desk all the time, which, I think a lot of our panels have talked about being antsy students and not really liking sitting behind a desk all the time. So it's been a great career that way, where in the spring through fall, I'm outside. And then when I come back in, I'm working on my maps, putting my data into our database. And it doesn't feel like I'm really that behind the desk because I'm still doing GIS and it's very visual. And I've always been a visual learner. And it's kind of fun. And I don't have to write really long reports because I've never liked writing too much, even though it's important. At least I keep telling my kids that. It's very important to write. So this is a picture of a couple little different things that we do throughout. I try to grab a whole bunch, from test pits to outreach to community gardens. We've done research projects with universities. We have collaborative grants that we do with our local universities. And then these are some soil pit shots that I put together just because I think soils are beautiful. And, some of these are from New York City, some of them are from the Adirondacks. I really like the bottom left one. It was a pit that we dug on campus at SUNY Adirondack, and it was like finding a 4-leaf clover because you can see the transition between the high clay soil on the left and the sandy soil on the right. And you can see how, I don't know how we found the transition. I mean, it took me 20 years to find this, but it was so cool how you could see clay on one side and sand on the other side. So, like I said, in New York, we have a really great diversity of soils, and I think they're pretty. And while we're digging for soils, we don't always have our head in the ground. A lot of our mapping details have been in the spring or in the fall. So we get to enjoy our, hike up and enjoy leaf peak season while we're trying to get samples. And we have been mapping subaqueous soils in New York, which is kind of neat. Our pilot project for subaqueous soils was down in Jamaica Bay. So you can actually, that was published a few years ago. So now it's on Web Soil Survey too. So it's kind of neat that all the coastal states in New England now are starting to map subaqueous soils. And then our NRCS has put a lot of videos together in their YouTube website. They have a day in the life series of a soil scientist. So if you're interested in what a soil scientist is like in other states, because it really varies so much state to state, because the soils are different in every state. Like in the Midwest, they have probe trucks where they just drop a hydraulic auger and they can, grab a huge, beautiful profile in like a few minutes. Now we can't do that in the Northeast because first we have to get the probe truck into wherever we're at. Either we're in the woods or in the city, and that's not going to work. And then we're the land of rocks, so it wouldn't work very well to begin with. So we hand dig a lot of our soil pits. We did have a truck hoe at one point, but it's kind of seen its last days. So there's a nice video series on a life of the soil scientist. And they also did it for we have one national lab because we tried to set a standard for all our lab samples. So there's one lab in Lincoln, Nebraska that processes all our lab samples. So it's kind of nice for me. I go out and collect the samples and I don't have to process them in a lab. They get shipped off to Lincoln, Nebraska. And then I get the results and then I can review my data, process it, analyze it, and work with that. So it sets one standard for the whole country, which is kind of nice. And then it's all that data is available on the internet for the whole country. So there's a series on recruitment tools. There's some videos on New York City, which is really nice because New York City was a big pilot project for urban soil mapping, so they kind of set the standard for that. And then Sheena will talk about the Soil Water District. The Soil Water District was a huge partner with our New York City Soil Survey. And then there's also our USA Jobs, which has all our federal jobs. You do have to be a US citizen to apply, but they do have a Pathways career internship program. So students apply, they spend a couple summers with us, and if it works out on both ends, they actually get offered full-time position. And that's it. You guys have any questions?
Wow, that's
yep, that was it.
fantastic. That's fantastic. Thank you, Olga.
Yeah.
I love the fact that you actually have this pathway from an internship to jobs that moves the students through.
Yeah,
if it
we
works
didn't
out.
always have that. Yeah, and that's pretty new. We didn't always have that. So it's kind of nice. We've had a huge retirement bubble, and a lot of us are doing 2, if not 3 jobs. So they're really trying to refresh and pick up new
That's
employees.
great. So it's kind of teaching people through the internships and giving them a path to move into the job. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say thank you. I think it's really interesting. A lot of students have never thought of the idea of soil science as a job. So to find out that this is an area that's out there and that this is a really vital area, that there are jobs all across the US, not to mention in New York City, it's pretty exciting. And to find out that this is a job where you don't have to sit behind a desk, but it not only involves field work, but also doing things as high tech as using GIS and remote sensing. That's probably pretty exciting for the students to hear about. So,
and we have done like little workshops where we do geophysics and agriculture, where we'll do demonstrations on those geophysical tools to give students access and see what those tools look like. So yeah, so it's kind of nice to be able to do I love being able to do outreach to urban areas because I was a kid from Queens. But yeah, to be able to introduce and expose students to ag, and it's been great to see how urban ag has really taken off the last few years.
that's fantastic. Oh, wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much. We appreciate it. All right, so let's move on to, speaking of urban ag, let's move on to our next speaker, who is Yemi Amu. Tell me if I'm saying your last name incorrectly, who's actually an urban agriculturalist. Perfect segue. Thank you, Olga, for setting that up for me. That actually worked out beautifully.
Yemi, you're muted, Yemi.
Yeah, I just realized that. Hi, everyone. Hello from Togo. It's actually nighttime here. And it's a pleasure to be on this panel talking about picking careers that work for you and designing your career to work for you. Because I'm an urban farmer, And I work like crazy during the growing season. I get to take about, 6 weeks off at the end of the year. I go back home to Nigeria where I am from, or go and explore other parts of the world. This time I am in Togo, exploring the food here and the culture, and trying to see what I can learn and bring back to my work in New York City. So I'm going to share my screen now. And a lot of what I share with you is not really going to be connected to what's on my screen, but it gives you a chance for you to see what I do and what my work involves. I am the founder of Oko Farms, an aquaponics farming and education company in New York. So that's just a fancy way of saying I grow vegetables and herbs and flowers and fruit in water, along with fish, using a symbiotic ecosystem. And I teach people how to do that. My path to urban agriculture is actually not a straight one. I never thought I would be farming. That was never a career trajectory for me. My first degree was actually in journalism. And after college, I went to Baruch College, which I loved my experience there. And after I graduated from Baruch College, I actually studied in journalism, minored in economics. After I graduated from Baruch, I ended up working for a music publishing company. I did that for several years and didn't really find it interesting enough for me. I felt like there was something more out there in the world, but I wasn't quite sure what it was. I knew I didn't want to be a journalist, wasn't really what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to write, so I continued taking a lot of writing classes. I started having some health-related issues. Actually, particularly, I've been dealing with like food and eating disorders for a long time. And it sort of came to a head, and that's what led me to nutrition. I started taking Ayurveda, which is a holistic nutrition education just for myself, to learn about food and health, but to learn about food and health away from diet culture, completely removed from diet culture, food and health focusing on holistic well-being, focusing on your mental health and your physical well-being. I went from there, and I went to culinary school, and then I became a nutrition and culinary educator. And then I went to grad school and got a degree in nutrition, behavior, and modification. And just a fancy degree where you learn to understand what barriers your clients have to eating healthily. What are the barriers? Is it education? Is it time? Is it culture? Is it access? And what I noticed with a lot of my clients is that it wasn't that they didn't know that eating healthily or eating fruits and vegetables was good for them. That wasn't the point. The point was they just couldn't afford it. If they had to pick between paying their rent or, meeting their other needs versus, spending money on expensive organic kale, the kale was always going to lose out. And that's when I started thinking about, how do you make healthy foods accessible to people? I grew up in Lagos, Nigeria. I actually didn't move to New York until I was 16. And, the reality there is that the poorer you are, the more fruits and vegetables you're eating. Junk food, processed foods, hamburgers, potato chips, all of those things are actually only available to the middle and upper class because they're imported. But the average person is eating, your starch. We eat a lot of starches with stews that are usually filled with vegetables, and your meat, and you snack on peanuts or cashews or some form of fruit or plantain chips. And, you know, I was really confused about the food system in the United States, and I couldn't figure out how to help my clients access healthier foods. I did a lot of, you know, trying to get them to go to the farmer's market, you know, where they could use their SNAP. But even that was a barrier, right? They were like, yeah, we're going to these farmers markets that are completely out of our neighborhoods. That's taking extra time. And they don't necessarily feel welcome in those spaces or feel comfortable in those spaces because the people in those spaces do not reflect them or their communities, or even the vegetables that are being provided there do not reflect their cultural foods and diets. And one day I was, while I was working at a housing facility for formerly homeless adults, I was having a conversation with one of my coworkers who was a social worker. And he said, you know what might be a good idea? I think we should start growing food. And I thought, huh? He said, yeah, you know, the building was intended to be a green roof. No one's doing anything with it. We can still make it a green roof. All we have to do is grow food on it instead. And I went, okay. Had no idea what I was doing. I think the first time we did anything is like one of the residents in the building passed away. And to honor him, we took his bed frame apart. It was a wooden frame. We took it apart, we took it on the roof and built it into a raised bed and put some soil in there. And that's how we started. Just that one raised bed that might have been, I think, maybe 2 by 4. And then we also we reached out to the Crown Heights CSA and asked them.
Sorry, Yemi, sorry to interrupt, but I just want to make sure that, you know, we see your first slide. I don't think we can see the other slides. Oh, there we go. Now you're moving. Okay, I wasn't sure if you were able to move or not. Just checking. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I lost my train. Yeah, so anyway, we reached out to the Crown Heights Food CSA. We asked them if they would be a partner with us so that our site would be a pickup and drop off of vegetables for their for the CSA. I don't know if you guys know what a CSA is. It's farm share or community supported agriculture. A group of people pay upfront for 52 weeks or 25 weeks, a certain numbers of weeks worth of vegetables, and the farmer delivers to them on a weekly basis throughout the growing season. The farmer, Sangley Farms, was really excited to actually be part of our community and to be part of the building. And he found out that we were trying to get a rooftop farm going on the roof, and he supported us by bringing us plants and donating some soil to us. And then I wrote a grant together with my colleagues, and that grant came with money to expand the rooftop farm. So we were able to expand to a full 1,200 square foot. And it also came with a mentor, someone who could guide me in figuring out how to farm. I'm from Nigeria. All we have is wet and dry season. I had to learn, and then also we grow in the ground. I had to learn about the right type of soil to have on a roof. I had to learn about seasonal crops and what makes sense. Anyway, a few months later, by May 2011, we had this beautiful rooftop farm that became the center of the community. Not only were the residents of the building coming up there to help run the farm and also harvest produce, but we also had people all over the community coming to volunteer in the farm. And that's when I realized, oh, this is a thing that I want to do. This is how I want to live my life. I'm less interested in telling people what to eat or how to eat. I'm more interested in not only making the food accessible to them, but also being in a position to create a space that folks feel comfortable coming to and gathering, creating a safe outdoor space for people, passing on skills for food production to people. A lot of the residents were really interested in learning how to grow food for themselves. And the fact that they were helping to grow the food also meant that they were eating more of it, which was really exciting for me. While I was on the roof, working on the roof as a manager, it just became my full-time job. So I was growing the food and then also cooking the food for the residents, and then doing all of my nutrition education workshops on the roof as well. One of the residents introduced me to aquaponics. He was like, listen, you get to grow fish and vegetables together, which means that your residents also get fish, which is really cool. And the best part is you don't even have to water your plants. That was pretty much the sell for me. I was sold right away. And I just started this deep dive into this thing called aquaponics. I had heard of hydroponics, which is growing in water and then adding the nutrients for the water to grow into. But aquaponics was a completely different thing. It's a symbiotic ecosystem where you have fish and vegetables growing together in water. And the beauty of this type of food production is that you're saving water. You're literally recycling that fish waste and using it to grow, whatever you want to grow. We grow a lot of vegetables, a lot of herbs, medicinal herbs, culinary herbs. We grow flowers that are medicinal and culinary as well, and flowers that are just, grown for their beauty. And a lot of what I do on a daily basis is teach aquaponics to people. So I do workshops like this all the time where I go in depth into what aquaponics is, how it developed. It's a very ancient technique. People have been doing it around the world for thousands of years. This is a picture of rice production in Indonesia. You can see on the picture on the left, you can actually see the fish in the bottom. I believe they have tilapia here, and then you have rice growing. The picture on the right is somewhere in Southeast Asia as well. I forget exactly where that is. So what I do every day is teach public engagement. I teach on the farm, and because of COVID, I teach on Zoom now. And of course I farm, right? I wake up every day, I go to the farm, I feed the fish, I do all of the daily work that farming involves. And I also do research, a huge amount of research as part of my work. I do aquaponics. I'm one of the few aquaponics farms in New York City. I think maybe there might be 3 of us. Oka Farms is also the only one that's outdoors and publicly accessible. This is a big deal. So it is important for us that we do research about what is possible to grow in aquaponics. We try to grow as many different things as possible from as many different cultures as possible. We try to keep a good catalog of what works and what doesn't work. We work very closely with Cornell Extension. They help us a lot with pest management. This type of farming system requires for you to use, as little pesticides as possible. But even more than that, I'm such a huge fan of actually avoiding that and using integrated pest management. So we work very closely with them to come up with ways of, growing plants that attract predator insects, that get rid of the insects that are problematic. They help us with identifying disease. They help us with determining how to prevent or control some of that disease. We do research on fish. What type of fish makes sense for aquaponics? What types of fish make sense for doing aquaponics indoors and outdoors? Which types of fish are the most resilient? Which types of fish make the most sense for an outdoor environment in New York City or, in Togo? If you are growing in Togo, we try to work with as many people as possible. I meet people from all over the world every day. I've had people from Chile, from Israel, from Jordan, from Korea, China, all over the world, the UK, come to the farm to see what we do. So my work really involves research, but also sharing what I'm learning with people. We also do a lot of research on fish health and fish well-being, because that's something that most fish farms don't do. We want our fish to eat healthily. We want to make sure that the food we feed them is not contributing to overfishing in the ocean and destroying the ocean. So we try to grow some of the food that they eat, and we do some of the food that we feed them, and we do quite a bit of research on that. We try to practice something called traditional ecological knowledge. Most people shy away from aquaponics because they think it's not natural. And my work really is to show them that farming is farming, and that, you know, just because some people do aquaponics indoors in controlled environment does not mean that it cannot be done outdoors using as little inputs as possible. And then, of course, my favorite part really is promoting biodiversity. We are a farm in New York City. That means that we're part of the outdoor environment. We want to contribute to increasing biodiversity in New York City. So we try to grow as many different types of plants from different plant families, but also really think about growing plants that help that attract a lot of different types of pollinators and insects. And one of the beautiful things about being a farm or being a farm that is all about water, or where you're growing in water, is that we just naturally attract all of these insects because they want water. Bees come to us, different types of bees and pollinators come to us, and we love that. And we try to grow as many things as possible to keep them on the farm. This is okra on the right, growing in water. A lot of people are like, "What? I can't believe you're growing okra in water." I grow okra every year. I'm a Nigerian. It's my favorite thing. I eat it all the time. That's onions you're seeing. You're seeing the purple is shiso that you're looking at. Okra in its younger stage there. Some onions and sorghum all the way in the back. They're really tall. We build systems for people. I build systems for people. We work with schools. We do tours. This is my friend Barry there assisting me with a tour. Sometimes I have so many different things to do.
Might have lost Yemi there for a second. Yeah. Well, let's wait for a little while. Maybe her internet connection is not great. But how
I
cool
noticed
is
someone had asked. Go ahead.
growing okra via aquaponics? That's pretty amazing. Sorry, what were you saying, Holly?
Mentioning that answering some of the questions, someone had asked about fish.
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, indeed. Aquaponics is the whole system of growing plants in water instead of soil, but you're using the fish, as you saw there, and the fish, you're using the fish's feces as nutrients, right?
Droppings. Yeah, think of it as a fish tank, and then you're growing your plants on top of it.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty much what aquaponics is.
Yeah, but so it becomes a more natural system, right? It's just like if you grew, it's like a lake, right? It's in a lake, you've got plants all over the outside of the lake, and what the animals do in the lake is part of the whole system. They help fertilize the lake. So
ecosystem. Yeah.
So maybe think about some questions for Yemi, so that when yes, you can do hydroponics indoors. And there are a number of different people that do that in New York City as well, a number of different organizations. So I think we should maybe move on to our last speaker, Shino. And then if Yami comes back on, you all can ask her questions at the end.
Sounds good. Thanks.
great.
Thanks, Holly.
Yeah.
Should I get started?
Yes. So let's
Okay.
go right ahead with Shino from the Soil and Water Conservation District. Hi, Shino.
Hello, Holly. This is actually a really dangerous thing. Now I want to change my career and do something else. Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Shino Tanikawa. I'm the Executive Director of the New York City Soil and Water Conservation District. This has been an incredible session. I love hearing how everybody ended up where she ends up or she is today. And that doesn't mean we're going to be here 20 years from now. So I'm going to share how I got to where I am today. I grew up in 2015 to attend high school here, and I ended up staying in this country. From a high school in Massachusetts, I went to Barnard College for 1 year. And then from Barnard College, I transferred to Parsons School of Design for a Bachelor of Arts degree in communication design. And then I worked as a staff designer at a studio in New York City, actually a few different studios. And I also worked as a freelance graphic designer for 4 years after I graduated from Parsons. And then I have I'm going to go into the detail of how that journey happened, but I do have a Master of Science degree from SUNY Stony Brook for the Marine Sciences Research Center, which is now called the School of Oceanographic Atmospheric Sciences, or something along those lines. Anyway, and then from there, I ended up at where I am today, which is the New York City Soil and Water Conservation District. So how did I go from Parsons School of Design to where I am today? Well, I got my degree from Parsons. I thought I wanted to be an artist, but to be an artist didn't mean that I could, to be a painter was not a choice because you can't pay the rent with being a painter. So I decided to be pragmatic and I went for communications design. So I went to Parsons. Here's some of the clients that the studio that I worked for had. We did some packaging for Grand Union Supermarket, which doesn't exist anymore. Barron's is a publishing company that has college guys and how-to books and whatnot. We also did a project for American Express at one point, and there were a whole bunch of other clients that the studios that I worked for had. And it was a great career, except one time I went on vacation in Mexico. And I got certified as a scuba diver, and I started diving in this beautiful Caribbean Mexican water. And this is what I encountered there. After that vacation, I came back and I said, you know what? I'm going to save the world. I don't want to do something that contributes to the problems in the world, because the design field back in those days, and this is 1980s, is when I was in the design field. We weren't using soy-based ink. We weren't using recycled paper. And it was what I perceived to be a highly wasteful industry. And I didn't want to be a part of the problem. I wanted to be a part of the solution. So I naively decided I'm going to go back to school, not realizing with a degree in visual arts, you still have to do a lot of undergraduate science courses. So I spent 2.5 years doing biology 101, physics 101, chemistry 101, organic chem 101, and all those science classes. I even had to do remedial math because in the field of graphic design, I didn't have to use algebra. Anyway, spent 2.5 years in undergraduate at Stony Brook until I was able to get accepted into the graduate program there. And I studied scallops, little baby scallops attached to eelgrass in the Peconic Estuary out in Long Island. And I was looking at predation on scallops by pufferfish. And I spent hours and hours with my scuba gear and wetsuits in the water, observing and running experiments underwater, which was a phenomenal experience. So from there, before I finished my thesis, I had my first baby. And lo and behold, I didn't expect this, but life takes you on a journey that you don't expect sometimes. After the baby came, I said, I don't want to do anything but raise my child. So I took fully 18 months off my career to be with my baby full time. And then after a year and a half of being a full-time mom, I was ready to be ready to start looking for a job, but I didn't want to have a full-time job. And I was lucky enough to have a husband who was able to support me in that. So I came across this part-time research assistant position with the Hudson River Foundation. And this was something that a friend from graduate school told me about. She called me one day and she said, I have this part-time job, but I'm going to go for a full-time job somewhere else, and they are looking for another person. And it was just perfect. It's 2 days a week at the Hudson River Foundation, which is downtown Manhattan, not too far from my house. And it's low stress, low key, but it still gets me into the field that I was going into. So I took that job and I worked there for another year and a half, until when my daughter was 3, I was finally ready to do full-time job search. So I started looking, but the Hudson River Foundation actually hosted a program called the New York, New Jersey Harbor and Estuary Program, which is a federal program that brings all the partners from both New York and New Jersey together to talk about clean water for the harbor and estuary and all the tributaries that feed into the system. So that meant that people from all different agencies and nonprofits were coming to the Hudson River Foundation for a variety of meetings. So I got to see people come and go as I'm doing my research assistant's job. And one of the people who used to come into the foundation for a variety of meetings was this woman named Eugenia Flato. This is back in 1998. She was 78 when I first met her. And she was not a scientist. She was an urban planner and an advocate and a very seasoned, I don't want to say politician because she was not a politician, but she worked in the housing sector. She worked in the environmental sector. She was an activist in New York City. She did a lot of different things. And she was the chair of the Soil and Water Conservation Board at the time. And she was looking to hire somebody full-time. And there I was, being a research assistant at the Hudson River Foundation, and Eugenia Flato, who comes and goes, one just said, well, I'm looking for somebody. And I applied and she hired me. There was a whole interview process and whatnot. It wasn't right on the spot, but she did hire me because she was used to seeing me at the foundation from meetings and whatnot. Unfortunately, she passed away in 2015, but she was 93. So she led an incredible life, and that can actually be a documentary someday. But anyway, that's how I ended up at New York City Soil and Water Conservation District. So what exactly do I do every day? Well, as an executive director, it's just a fancy title for doing everything, because Soil and Water Conservation District is a tiny agency. And that means, yes, I get to oversee program implementation, which is pretty exciting. And I do get to run some of the programs, which is also exciting. But I also have to do budget and financial management, which is kind of a drag. And I also have to do human resources management, which is also a drag. But having these different pieces under my care or under my responsibilities is actually good, because I get to do different things. I'm not doing the same thing every day, every week, every month. I get to have a little bit of management. I get to do a little bit of programming. I get to actually work with students sometimes, and I get to do presentations like this, as well as learning the human resources and finance size of the business as well, which is useful. So the programs we run, we have 3 major buckets: green infrastructure and stormwater management, education, and Urban Soils Institute. And I have people working for Urban Soils Institute, and I have people working for education. So my primary program responsibility is in the area of green infrastructure, but I get to oversee all 3 program areas as an executive director. For a little while, for stormwater management, we were actually building stormwater capture planters on private properties. This one used to be at the Newtown Creek Alliance waterfront site. I built these planters, and I actually, when I say I built them with my own hands because the budget was so small, I could not hire a carpenter. So I ended up having to build these planters with my two hands by myself, which I'm pretty proud of. This is probably the best work I've done. And I've also built a planter system like this for a low-income housing apartment building in the Bronx, and creating green spaces in little planters wherever we could. So these were projects we did for a little while until we realized maintenance of these systems was a huge issue. As a very small agency, we can build these systems, but we don't have the resources to continue to maintain them. The intent was that residents of the building or the people who work in the building would take care of these plants, but that doesn't always work out that way. So we've sort of abandoned that approach of building physical projects. So this is what my day actually looks like these days. I have meetings with other people. I read plans and review them. I check emails and communicate with people with emails all the time. I participate in conferences, whether I attend conferences or I present at a conference, or I plan and organize conferences. And then I have more meetings, and I review some more documents for my partner organizations and give comments. And I check my email again, lots of emails. And then I review some plans some more. Some of these plan reviews require public comments. Sometimes it's actually commenting before the final version comes out. So it seems like it might be dull, but it actually isn't. This is really all about working with other people. And the best solutions in the world come from collaboration with a wide range of perspectives and rights holders. So that's a lot of what I do day to day, whether it's email communication or physical meetings or virtual meetings. I'm always working with other people to come up with solutions. And it's a wonderful way of spending my day, really, because listening to other people and their perspectives and their experiences is what gives me creative ideas for whatever problem that I'm trying to solve. So these are some of the partners that I work with. So again, I'm working with people, which means I have a lot of partners. I met Holly through Swim Coalition, and here I am working with her on this and a couple other projects together. Again, New York, New Jersey Harbor and Estuary Program, I'm still involved with that through the Citizens Advisory Committee. NRCS Natural Resources Conservation Service has been a long-time partner to Soil and Water Conservation District. I met Olga probably 10, 15 years ago, maybe even longer. Currently, our organization is a member of the Forest for All New York City Coalition, which is doing some really exciting work in advancing urban forestry and how to get more trees planted in New York City. Hudson River Park is another partner, and we have a lot more that I didn't have space to put in here, but it really is about working with other people. And then occasionally I get to go sailing for a school group. This was back in, I don't remember how long ago it was, but this is Inglewood Boat Basin. I usually take school groups to Jamaica Bay, Floyd Bennett Field for sailing trips like this. And those are really excellent moments out of the office doing field work with children and students. So the people I work with are, and this is, I thought, something that you might be interested in. I have a Master's of Science in Marine Environmental Sciences, but I work with a really diverse array of people. I do work with scientists and engineers. They might be an ecologist, hydrologist, geologist, climate scientist, physicist, chemist. They might be a civil engineer. They might be an environmental engineer. There might be another type of engineering that I don't really know about. We work with urban planners a lot. These are folks who think about cities planning city landscape at the city level or neighborhood level. We also work with public policy analysts, people who work on policies, developing them or reviewing them. And we work with environmental lawyers quite a bit. I was just reviewing a state bill with a couple of lawyers earlier today. Community organizers are important too. We work with them to understand what the issues are on the ground at the community level. And again, we work with educators. We go staining with students and educators, or sometimes it's just a Zoom workshop with students. And concerned citizens, yes, we do work with them because there are places where concerned citizens can get involved, such as the Citizens Advisory Committee of the Harbor and Estuary Program, or the Swim Coalition has concerned citizens who come to our public meetings. We also work with artists, which is a really thrilling partnership. And the people that I work with, they work for a variety of different places as well. So a lot of them work for city, state, or federal government agencies. So we have USDA folks here. 2 of them are from USDA. We have somebody from the DEC. And so that is a very common partner that we have, is people who work for public agencies. But we also work with consulting firms and engineering firms. There are a lot of these private consultants who work in my sphere. There are a lot of not-for-profit organizations, Riverkeeper, Natural Resources Defense Council. Those are 2 organizations that we work very closely with. And there are plenty of others like Newtown Creek Alliance, Guanas Canal Conservancy. And then there are schools, because we work with students. We clearly work with schools as well. Institutions of higher education like LaGuardia Community College. It's people who do my kind of work also work for these institutions of higher education, because I work with Holly on the project. Real estate development is actually becoming an important partner in some of the work that I do, because we are talking about green roofs. We're talking about changing the way the city is built to absorb stormwater and rainwater. It's actually becoming more important for us to work with people who work for real estate development. And then again, because we work with lawyers, we do have people who work for law firms. So in this sphere of soil and water conservation and environmental protection in more general in New York City, there is a wide range of pathways for people to be engaged in this field. So I don't want you to limit your thinking to just environmental science. And I'm not saying that to like be disrespectful to you all, but keep an open mind. If you're really interested in something, you can always find a path. Even if you didn't go to an environmental science school, or you don't have a degree in environmental science. I noticed there was one person who has a human resources degree track and wanted to know how she can get involved. Sometimes a degree in the related field is not a prerequisite to pursue a career in environmental protection. So that is my quick and dirty overview of how I ended up where I ended up. And there is my contact information and the website. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you, Shino, for that wonderful presentation. Yemi, could we ask you to please complete your slides? We'd love to hear the rest of that presentation.
Hi.
Thank you.
Sorry, I wasn't even sure where I went.
If you share your slides, we can tell you.
Okay, awesome. I'm gonna share it now. Sorry about that. This is
not your fault. You know, as Preeti said, we're used to this in India too.
Okay, so
we had passed the point. You had introduced aquaponics, and we were still like, you know, talking about. We saw the pictures about the fish and.
Okay, so wow. So what is aquaponics? It is growing fish and vegetable and fish and plants together in water. Instead of getting rid of that fish waste and polluting the environment with it, that fish waste is full of nitrogen. We recycle that waste and give it to plants, and plants filter the water out for the fish. In between, the microorganisms doing their thing to make sure that fish waste is converted into nitrogen, which plants take up. Super simple. We get to save water. That is the best part of this kind of farming. And I was attracted to it, honestly, for two reasons. One, I love the idea of growing plants in water and never having to water, because we spend a lot of time watering, especially in the summertime and on the roof where the temperature is a little extreme in the summer. And then also growing up in a country where folks have very limited access to water. And in Togo, for instance, where I am right now, farmers typically wait for the rainy season. There's very little irrigation that happens during the dry season. And the dry season is from about December to March. So having this system of food production where you can save water and recycle water, you're not polluting the environment, and you're also able to raise both fish and plants seemed like something everyone should do, especially in places where folks don't have a lot of access to water. So really intrigued. I wanted to try it, started doing some research. I use YouTube, as I call it, YouTube University. I certainly started out with YouTube University. And then from there, I visited different parts of the country that were doing aquaponics. I did a lot of reading. And then I discovered that it is a pretty ancient technique. Rice cultivation has been done this way for thousands of years. The Chinese especially have their earliest records of this type of production that combines fish and plants together. That goes as far back as 400 BC. Those are the earliest records. But then there are other people around the world. You know, in Mexico, you have the Chinampas. In this picture that you're looking at, this is in Indonesia. You have the system called the Sawah Tambak, where tilapia and rice are growing together. And I went from the studying and the research, and I'm very scrappy. I found some land. You know, I was like, this thing is amazing. This system of food production is amazing. And I think that is something that's worth exploring. And I want to demonstrate it. I want people to see it. And I want people to learn about it, because we are living in a climate crisis right now. And the different types of food productions available is something that we should all be exploring. So I set up my farm in 2013. I'm not going to go into all the details, but it took 2 years finding a space where I could grow food and turn into the Aqua Farms Aquaponics Education and Production Center. So what I do on a daily basis is not just farm, but also teach people about food and farming. So there's a lot of education like I'm doing now. I do education both on the farm and off the farm. I have people from all over the world who come to my farm. We are the only aquaponics farm in New York City that's open and accessible to the public. So we have people from literally everywhere, from Chile, from Korea, from Jordan, we've had farmers from Jordan come check us out. We've had people from the UK, we've had folks from the Caribbean, and we have students from all over New York City, from elementary school through through college, that come to the farm. I actually have a picture here. That's a trainee that we have who just harvested a leek, and she's really excited. She's from Haiti and is planning to start an aquaponics farm in Haiti, because Haitians are dealing with a lot of structural issues that is causing a lot of hunger in different communities in Haiti. And part of what I do is make aquaponics farming accessible to as many different people as possible, that regardless of where you are in the world, you are able to grow this kind of food. You're able to grow food using this farming method, and to make sure that folks are able to grow the foods that are culturally relevant to them. So the picture you see on the left is okra. That's okra going in an aquaponics system, literally in water. And the video you see on the right is amaranth greens. in my language is called choco, and that's it growing in the aquaponic system as well, growing in water. So lots and lots of research. What can grow? What doesn't grow? What haven't we tried growing? Why is it growing, or why is it not growing? You know, there's lots and lots of research happening, not only on the plant side, but also on the fish side. Tilapia is very commonly used in aquaponics, but does tilapia make sense for New York City? And does it make sense for New York City, for an outdoor farm in New York City, considering the fact that tilapia is very sensitive to cold temperatures? So we're constantly exploring other types of fish, trying to figure out what works, what doesn't work. We have learned that carp is amazing, very resilient fish. There's edible carp, and then there are species of edible carp and the ornamental species all grow really well in aquaponics. This is a mini aquaponic system that we started for an organization called the Campaign Against Hunger in Bed-Stuy. And I'm really proud of this part of my work, because not only am I teaching people how to grow food and growing food myself and learning different ways of growing food, but I'm also able to work with other people to be able to grow food for their own communities. This is a class happening here where we're showing green onions growing in the aquaponic system. The picture on the left is at a school, a high school in Brooklyn, in not Bensonhurst, somewhere in Brooklyn, I forget, where the students designed and built an aquaponic system. The fish are in that black tub in the bottom, and those are the greens that they grew. They did everything themselves, from designing the system to putting it together, to selecting the fish, selecting the plants, and all we did was guide them. And the best part was their excitement in harvesting it and eating, which was really fun. The picture on the right is a group of 6th graders or 5th graders who came to the farm, and they are harvesting mint for a salad. These are trainees on the farm getting ready to harvest some lemongrass. This part of my research, and the part that I love about my work, is just discovering what is possible. What can you do? What can you not do? What makes sense to grow, and what really doesn't make sense to grow in an aquaponic system. We grow grains, we grow rice, millet, and sorghum. You're looking at sorghum and millet here on the left, and on the right, you're looking at turnips. So we also grow root crops. And then we work very closely with other organizations and institutions. We work with Cornell Extension. They help us a lot with integrated pest management. We really do try to avoid using any kind of pesticides, whether it is natural or not, because pesticides really can't discriminate between good and bad insects. What we try to do is plant as wide a diversity of crops as possible, and attract and grow a lot of flowering plants that attract not just pollinators, but beneficial insects that will help us keep population of the harmful insects down. And we keep recordings of all of that. What do we naturally attract, good and bad? What can we do to increase the population of the beneficial insects? So part of my job, in addition to seeding and transplanting and harvesting and teaching and researching, is also capturing as many of these insects as possible when I see them, and also just taking the time to relax and enjoy watching these insects just enjoy themselves. So a typical day for me would, involve going to the farm, working with students, either having several groups of students come into the farm to learn about aquaponics. We talk about food justice, we talk about climate change, we talk about the role of urban farms in not only making New York City more resilient towards with dealing with the impact of climate change, but also how urban farms help to increase food security for urban residents and for people around the world. We talk about some of the benefits and challenges. Sometimes we cook. Once the students leave, I work with the trainees on the farm. We come up with a task list of what we need to do for the day. I answer emails. I, take records. I meet with folks from Cornell. I also work with NYU students who are doing research on fish so that we can learn to treat our fish more humanely and come up with systems, just ways of treating our fish that promotes their wellness and their well-being. This research apparently is very new. And we're learning a lot of fun stuff, like fish recognize you and they have personalities and they even have memories, which is really fun. They have memory, which is really fun. It's actually great to see the fish make eye contact. It's interesting. So yeah, I know we're running out of time, so I don't want to keep us, but I'm so happy I was able to get through this without any more interruptions. Thank you so much for those of you who stayed behind.
Yemi, thank you so much for that. This is fascinating, the work that you do. I have 3 points to make. The first thing is all of this research and education that you're focusing on kind of almost makes it like a foolproof opportunity for the rest of us to use your tried and tested, mechanisms. And so, yeah, it's like fail-proof almost, or at least you're minimizing the failure. So thank you for that. It's going to be easier for us this summer as we work with you and trying to get that at our LaGuardia campus. The second thing is, as you said, the time is so ripe for what you're doing because
Yes.
the climate change, food insecurity, morbidity, disease, like it is just, this is how we need to proceed, as a world so that we can make it equitable for everyone. And then finally, you sharing, you were on your path to journalism and thank God you ditched that because the rest of us now get to eat and learn how to grow our food rather than read about it. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's really fascinating to see how it seems like all of our panelists were on different paths and then they took just the right class or had just the right opportunity, right? And it just kind of opened something up to them. They either took a class or they had some, experience that just kind of, wait, this is something that I'm really interested in. Let me just jump on that. So, I just wanted to mention that, find what you're interested in and take those opportunities because that's the most important thing. As you see, all of our panelists are doing something that they truly love. And I got to tell you, it's the most important thing in life. Preeti?
Yeah, no, I have nothing to say. I think all of you guys did a fantastic job. I would love to hear from students. So let's open this up to our students. If you guys have any questions, the floor is all yours. Please go ahead, either for us or all of our panelists who are here.
We didn't get to say thank you to Shino, by the way. So I just wanted to say thank you to her because we wanted to let Yemi finish her presentation. But I wanted to say a quick thank you to Shino. That was an amazing presentation. It was interesting to see the many ways that you connect with people across the city and how you are making a difference through giving comments and working with elected officials and concerned citizens and people in all these different organizations across the city. I don't think that most people realize that there are jobs like that where we actually connect with people all over the city and make a difference in our lives in these type of policies. So that's really, really fascinating. So thank you.
Okay, so we have a question in the chat box from Crystal asking if any panelists are willing to mentor students. So internship and mentorship opportunities are something that our students are always looking for. So if you have any suggestions in that direction, panelists, that would be great.
So I don't have internships, unfortunately, because we struggle with funding. That's always an issue. But when people find me from websites or social media or however they find me, a lot of times people do reach out to me and say, I'm looking for a job and so sent me to you, whatever it is. I'm always more than happy to meet with the person who's reaching out to me at the beginning of the career and share my contact information and my partner's information. So it's mini mentoring, but I'm always happy to do that. So if when you're ready, or if you have any questions that you want to talk to me one-on-one, I'd be happy to do that. And you have my contact information. I'll put it in the chat again.
Awesome. Thank you, Shino. Olga and Lourdes, do you guys have any suggestions for our students about internships or mentorship opportunities?
So I mentioned NRCS has a pathways program for college students before, and all federal positions for USDA are always posted on USA Jobs. And I put the link on the chat.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, and for us with the museum, I was just going through right now because a lot has changed during the pandemic. So a lot of people have stopped taking interns. I know I have, so I don't know when I'll pick that up. But if you go to internships.si.edu opportunities, and I would suggest that in those cases, like if you are really into jellyfish, if you're really into bees, find the person who has published on that at the museum. And if you are interested, like make it really personal and contact that person and say, I love bees. I want to learn about pollination. I would love to have an internship. What would you recommend? And make it, let them see the passion that you have. I mean, that's speaking from my experience, that if I get someone, I don't care about their grades. If they say to me, I've been holding this collection and making my collection for decades, you know, or for 2 years, I've only been thinking about weevils. And I'd be like, you got it. Let's go. You're getting an internship with me and we'll work it out. I'll see how we can get you in. And a lot of times they're unpaid internships, but there are paid internships through the NHRE program of the Museum of Natural History. And that's where I'm stationed. As far as USDA, I've never really had a USDA intern with our laboratory, so I can't speak to that. They all come through the Museum of Natural History.
Thank you, Lourdes. I think you brought up a really good point about, and I think, you know, just to answer what Brian is asking in the chat as well. So Brian's question was, are there some requirements needed to pursue those internships? As Lourdes suggested, you'll find that most places, particularly when they're looking for undergraduates, they're not really looking at grades, but they are looking for interest, right? So they want to kind of gauge what your interest is, particularly when you're trying to look for a research position. It's really important that you let the person you're writing to know what your interest is and how you got interested. And so crafting that letter really well is super important. And I think Lourdes mentioned that, and I think that's an important point to kind of keep in mind, not just for internships, but when you're looking for research opportunities, that's something to keep in mind as well. Okay, let's see. So Antoinette has a question about growing aloe vera indoors. Does anyone, maybe perhaps Yemi can answer that? Can you grow aloe vera indoors? Is that a possibility? All right, so I'm assuming there are no more questions. If not, we've gone way over time. So thank you so much to our panelists again for being here. I know your time is precious and you guys do very important work. We really appreciate you spending time with our students. You know, as you probably know, being an undergraduate can be a tricky position to be in. It takes a bit of navigation. So your help is really, we're very thankful for your help. So thank you. And thanks students for joining in. I will be recording, this presentation is recorded. So after the presentation, I will email you guys the recording, okay? And please do take that survey if you haven't already. Thanks everyone for coming. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Prissy, Holly, and all the panelists. You did a great job. Thank you so much.
Jenny, thanks for being here, Jenny.
Christina, mine is rescued from the trash also. That's so funny. Why do people throw away aloe vera? Whenever you burn yourself cooking, you just, you know, it's perfect for that. Now somebody threw it away and it was like tiny little thing and now it's like huge.
So you've been growing aloe vera at home?
Yeah, we rescued it from the, people throw away plants all the time and we're like, no, poor thing. And then we rescue them and yeah, all the time. We can't bear to see them just tossed away. They're
No.
alive. Makes me sad.
Yeah, this Monstrosa behind me was also a gift. It's gone crazy, and it's
it's
light in
huge.
this room, and it's just gone crazy behind me.
Every time I see you, it's bigger.
We have a
Oh, yes,
Where's the survey at?
Yeah, go ahead, Jenny. What were you saying?
we have a community garden on 106th Street and Columbus Avenue. I live 107th Street and Columbus Avenue. And it's been a struggle. I see the gardeners every day they got volunteers coming to, but maintenance, we have a rat problem, a severe, I mean, really bad problem with rats. In fact, I'm trying to call the health department, but I've seemed not to get an answer back and forth. But it tends to, when you have a problem like that, it becomes very, very difficult. As soon as the plants come up, the roots are eaten, everything.